Welcome to our channel. My name is Sandra, and I'm part of the Creative Wondering Duo. Well, I'm working on a fun project that's been in the go for a while, trying to use up all my bits and pieces from the scrap basket and making what they call a crumb quilt. And I've had a few questions about the pictures I posted, so I'll just kind of give you a brief rundown. I'm not going to do a demo on the machine or anything, on the sewing machine, but I'll show you the quilt here and tell you about it as we go along. Anyway, roll the intro. Welcome back. Okay, what I do is I try and make a 12.5-inch block, a square block. So I will pull out like this strip here. All of these fabrics were sewn together and they went into a quilt. So I had a bunch of these bits and pieces when I squared up the quilt and finished making it. Here's another block that I was making something out of. And so what I did here is I just bordered it out until I had a 12.5-inch square. It's kind of hard to see where the squares end and the next one begins. Then I had some pieces left over from a jelly roll, and so I just sewed them onto this one here. And I believe this is the 12.5-inch block here. You can see around. And I just sew them in between making other blocks or whatever. I pull out the fabric and I just start stitching together. This is some fabric that was sewn together from another quilt. And I just, anything that I have sewn together. Here's another block. I was testing out a block for something else, and that was a 12.5-inch block, so I just left it, put it in there. Here I had a bunch of strips and I sewed them together, cut them into a 12.5-inch block. I don't have any, oh yeah, here I do. I have some really wonky looking pieces, and I just lay a ruler on to straighten this because this edge was all jagged, straighten it, and then sew another chunk on. This is even flannel in here and brushed cotton. So, I mean, as long as it's all cotton, it's okay. And I don't know if you can see this, but this piece here did not make a 12.5-inch block. I had to sew on a little piece. So it ends up being a really tiny strip in there. Anything goes. And when I get enough of the blocks together, I will stitch them all into a quilt top, and then I put it on the machine. And I've just been having fun playing with my stitching. I'm not any specific pattern. This is my practice piece. It's going to be for my bed. And I had to have some beautiful flannel, not flannel, it's, jacket, a knit jacket, flannel type fabric. It's beautiful, thick, really thick, almost fleece fleece, that's the name of it. And I had some of that left over from the store, so when I had the shop, so I just sewed that together, and that's going to be my backing. So with a light layer, a very thin batting, and that, and the top, it's going to be a fairly warm quilt. And make it to be used. Here's another block from another quilt that I made. I never throw the blocks away or whatever. I just put them in the scrap basket and pull them out for when I make what they call a crumb quilt. And as long as your blocks are square, it doesn't matter what size you make them. I just find I have a 12.5 inch square ruler, so that's what I use. If you want to use another ruler that is, say, I don't know, a 20 inch ruler, you can. It doesn't matter as long as your blocks are square and your fabric lays flat. You can do this with denim. You can do it with whatever fabric you want. I've cut muslin and into squares and then just laid pieces on top and used a zigzag stitch and stitched them down. They were oddball pieces and a lot of very tiny pieces, but I have a hard time throwing away good fabric. So I try and use it up however I can to make something that's useful. You'd think after making all of this into a quilt, because this is quite a huge quilt, I believe it's over 100 inches long and 96 inches wide, so it's a good, almost king-size quilt. You'd think that I had all my scraps used up. No chance. I'll show you my scraps. Let's go for a walk. I have a bin there that is full of scraps. There's another bin full of scraps. I had this bin here just about empty, but you can see now that it's overflowing. And then there are bins up there, which I've tried to put specific colors into. And I've got bins up there with specific colors again. And there's more down there. So yeah, I have scraps to use. Oh, here's another bin of scraps. So, but what I do is I have this right here. It's full of stuff now. It becomes a catch-all. But while I'm sewing other things, I will sew together blocks. I just sew pieces of fabric together until I have enough for blocks, and whatever comes out and whatever size they are. You got strips, sometimes you end up with some pretty tiny little pieces in there. But they look really nice when they're made into a, oh, see, there's a couple of blocks from something I was working on. But when they end up all into one quilt, they look pretty decent. I've got a quilt here that I had a lot of strips, different size strips. So I sewed them all together. See if I can get it off the hanger here. Just a minute. There, I spread that quilt out, or that quilt top. And you can see that it's all different size strips. And I had all these strips, so I just sewed them together and squared them off into long rows. And I had different size rows. So I added some plain fabric in the center to make it wide enough. And I added plain fabric on the sides for borders. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to do some applique in these areas or not. Haven't decided yet. I might do a vine or something, or maybe I'll just do some really fancy stitching in there on the big machine. Draw out a design, and I haven't decided yet. You don't always have to make a pattern quilt. I have lots of quilts, quilt kits, and with patterns in them that I will be doing up, but I also sometimes just like to have fun sewing, and it's called no mind sewing. You just sew whatever together and keep it going. So anyway, that's a couple of quilts that I've been working on. Here's another one that I've been working on. I had a lot of 2.5-inch strips. If I have bits and pieces of fabric left over and I can get a 2.5-inch strip out of it, I cut 2.5-inch strips. And as you can see, this one is fairly long. It goes over the end of the bed yet and right up to the front. And I haven't decided. This edge is all jagged. I haven't squared it up. But I might be cutting this one into different strips this way and then adding plain borders in between, or I don't know, maybe I'll just cut it apart and make 2 small quilts, 2 small cuddle quilts. Good thing I'm to the bottom of this quilt, because that sounds like Dave coming in for lunch.
What makes you think that?
Because he's in here.
There you go. What, does that mean you just got done?
It's about done.
Oh, there you go.
I'm not making lunch until it's done.
Wet.
I know. as I was taking the pins out along the bottom. That helps to keep the bottom straight. This is PVC pipe, and you just cut it. I got these from Jamie Wallen. That's what him and Richie use. And if your backing is long enough, it sure saves time. These blue ones were long pieces that I got from Quilting, the dealer in Alberta. Gave them to me, and Dave took and cut them into shorter pieces because they were too long. There you have it. It's ready to be trimmed and bound. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. So do all the things, like, subscribe, share it on social media, like and subscribe on YouTube, and join us again. We try and get a video out every week. So, yep, join us again. Take care. Stay real.